Hi, I'm Travis, and this is the TM Podcast. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Russell Williams. If you're listening in the United States, you may not have heard of him. That's because this is a well-known case in Canada. I decided that I would do this one because of a few suggestions from my Canadian listeners, and after researching, I was really blown away at the fact that I'd never heard of him. I'll be doing episodes on all of the major, well-known serial killers, but I hope to also introduce you to cases that you've never heard of, this being one of them for me. So, David Russell Williams was born on March 7th, 1963 in Bromsgrove, England. When he was young, his family immigrated to Canada. They moved to the Chalk River, which is in Ontario. When he was 6 years old, his parents got a divorce and his mother quickly remarried to Dr. Jerry Savka. After the marriage, they moved again to Scarborough, Ontario. He attended high school at Birchmount Collegiate Institute, where their motto is actually Truth Conquers All, ironically, and he delivered newspapers for extra cash and enjoyed playing music. In 1979, his parents moved to South Korea so that his stepfather could oversee a reactor project. He went to South Korea with his parents, but he only stayed there for a short time, and they sent him back to Canada. So he finished his last 2 years of high school at a boarding school. It was said that he was a good student and was elected as prefect of his boarding house, which basically means that he was the leader. He went on to study at the University of Toronto, Scarborough, where he earned the name Sarge because of the strict rules and guidelines that he set up for his fellow students. He was also known to be a prankster that would often pick locks on doors and hide in rooms or closets and jump out and scare people. Knowing that he would go on to kill people in a similar fashion makes that super ominous, but isn't something people really thought into at the time. Tons of college kids are pranksters and do crazy stuff, but they don't all go on to be murdering lunatics. But, prankster or not, Russell graduated in 1986 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. In 1987, he enrolled in the Canadian Air Force. His decision to go in the Canadian Air Force and become a pilot was heavily influenced by the movie Top Gun that had came out the year before. He would receive his flying wings in 1990 and was assigned to the Canadian Forces Base Portage-la-Prairie in Manitoba. He served as an instructor there for 2 years before he was promoted to captain on January 1st, 1991. That same year in June, he married Mary Elizabeth Harriman, who would go on to be the director of the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada. So, from the outside, they seem like two great people. Over the next few years, he would fly the CC-144 Challenger in a coastal patrol and electronic warfare role. In 1994, he began transporting VIPs to include high-ranking government officials and foreign dignitaries. In 1999, he was promoted Major and served in Ottawa as the multi-engine pilot career manager. He earned a Master of Defense Studies from the Royal Military College of Canada in 2004 with a 55-page thesis that supported a preemptive war in Iraq. He was soon promoted to Lieutenant Colonel in June of that same year and appointed to Commanding Officer of the 437 Transport Squadron. From 2005 to 2006, he also served as the Commanding Officer of Camp Mirage, which was a secretive logistics facility supposedly located in Dubai. And I say supposedly because it's considered an open secret similar to Area 51 in the United States. During this time period, him and his wife moved to Orleans, a suburb in Ottawa. Russell also owned a small home in Tweed, about 30 minutes from Ottawa. Now, I could go on and on about Russell's military career, but it is so extensive and so boring that you probably would stop listening. Overall, he was the poster boy for military service, climbing through the ranks over the years and becoming a name that everyone that he was around knew and respected. Some of those VIPs included the Queen of England, the Duke of Edinburgh, the Governor General, and the Prime Minister of Canada. So this guy was very well trusted and respected. In 2009, his career reached its peak and he met one of the goals of pretty much every single officer in any branch of the military. He was promoted to colonel, and on July 15th, he was sworn in as the wing commander of the Canadian Forces Branch Trenton. Now, Trenton was one of the biggest Canadian air bases. So at this point, he's at the top of the world. In documentaries on this case, you'll see hours of videos of him taking part in events or being interviewed by local news agencies, and he always seems calm and level-headed. It's very confusing yet interesting to me how people like this can separate themselves like that. Think back to when he was in college, when he was a drill instructor, but also a prankster. To everyone that knew him, up until the truth came out, he was super nice, calm, and a great leader. But on the other side of himself was this absolute monster. So now that you know who he is, I'll go into the crimes that were going on while he was out playing hero for the community. In January of 2009, a family had come home from a trip in Toronto, and their daughter was unpacking her things and she noticed something strange. She noticed that all of her underwear were missing. Her parents dismissed it initially, but when she went back upstairs to check again, she realized that she had shoes, dresses, bathing suits, and even pictures of herself missing. They called the police and they took DNA samples and let them know that there were other thefts being reported in the area. Between 2008 and 2009, there were 34 reported break-ins and hundreds of items of female lingerie, underwear, and photos missing. Ottawa police told the communities to be vigilant and be aware of their surroundings and to lock their doors. They began working diligently to find a suspect, but they had no leads. Nearby in Tweed, several break-ins had been reported as well, with the same things being taken. Sometimes the break-ins were so stealthy that people didn't even know what had happened until they couldn't find a specific item of clothing. Theft of clothing was pretty much all that it was for a while, but on September 17th of 2009 at 1 a.m., there was a woman who was asleep on her couch with her child in the next room when someone broke in. The man tied her up, sexually assaulted her, and then took several photographs and then left at about 3 a.m. The very next night at the same house, there was another break-in where some of the items were taken. That same house would be burglarized one more time a week later by what the woman assumed to be the same person. This to me is an important point in the escalation from theft to sexual assault, because that's a huge jump and must have excited him so much that he just had to go back. And you'll see this a lot with some of these sexual sadists. There's a point that they reach where what they're doing is just not enough. They have to push it just a little bit more, and it escalates. In the last week of September, a nearby house was also broken into 3 times. The first 2 times, only small items were taken, but the third time, on September 30th, the female homeowner was attacked. She was tied up, beaten, and had her clothes cut off before she was sexually assaulted and photographed. She asked the attacker if he was going to kill her, and he responded, "No need for that." She told police that she thought she had heard that voice before, but couldn't quite place who she thought it was. The police knocked on every door in Tweed, hoping to find some sort of lead. The police thought they had their man when they arrested Larry Jones of Cozy Cove Lane in Tweed. They arrested him because the second sexual assault victim thought the voice that she heard might have been his. They eventually cleared him after several hours of interrogation and several weeks of follow-ups. But I can imagine that he spent some time dealing with the rumors and allegations before the real criminal was arrested. I wonder if he thought for a second that Russell Williams, the man who owned the house right next door to his, was the real man terrorizing his community. Break-ins and theft continued to happen in the area, and at one point there were multiple break-ins at one woman's home where the person stole not only underwear, but sex toys from her. She returned home from work to find the message, "Call the police, I want to show the judge your big dildos," on her computer screen. The woman stated that she knew for a fact she had locked all the doors in the house before leaving, as there had been a break-in the night before. She is sure that the burglar had to have stayed hidden inside the house until she left to be able to get in and do that. And that is terrifying. On November 25th, 2009, the crimes would escalate again. This time it was beyond just sexual assault. The body of Corporal Marie Como was found in her home in Brighton, Ontario. She was a military flight attendant who loved her job, and it said that she loved it because she could fly around the world and try foods from other places. Police ruled the death as a homicide due to asphyxiation. A few months later, on January 30th, 2010, 27-year-old Jessica Lloyd is reported missing. She had sent a text message to a friend on the 28th at 10:36 p.m. saying, good night, or night night, but did not show up to work the next day. Police searched a very large area with no luck, even using helicopters and search teams. There were Facebook groups set up in hopes of finding or collecting any information that could help point them in the right direction. It seemed like she had vanished out of nowhere for no reason. All of her items were still at home. She left no clues. A few truckers that drive the route that goes past Jessica's house called it in the police and stated that they had seen a small SUV in a clearing near that same home a few days prior. When police investigated the area, they discovered perfectly preserved tire tracks in the snow. After analyzing the tire tracks, they set up roadblocks in the area and compared all the tires of the drivers to the ones that they found in the clearing. Exactly 1 week later, one of the roadblocks stops Colonel Russell Williams. He is driving a 2001 Nissan Pathfinder with tires that match the treads that were left at the scene. Rather than arresting him there, they placed him under police surveillance without his knowledge. Tires aren't as unique as fingerprints or blood, and just the tread on the tires could be on any other vehicle that's in the area, as they aren't always vehicle or person specific. On February 7, 2010, the police called Russell in to ask him a few questions, as they had several others with matching tread. The interrogation itself started off very casual. Russell didn't seem afraid and was very calm. I'll play a few seconds of the start of the interrogation and notice how he doesn't seem concerned at all that he's in a police department. I think that Detective Sergeant Jim Smith does a great job at staying on track and breaking him down throughout the course of the interrogation.
Clear. As you can see here, everything in this room is videotaped and audio taped.
Check.
You ever been interviewed by the police in a room like this before?
I have never been interviewed like this.
Oh, no? Okay.
No.
Let's get this set up here.
I guess the closest interview by NIS for top secret clearance.
Oh, yeah? All right. Well, again, Russell, I appreciate you coming in. An investigation like this, I mean, I'm sure you can appreciate it's been big news, especially down Belleville way. And, you know, obviously our approach to cases like this is that we don't give up on somebody being alive until we get evidence that they're not. So because of that, we're treating Jessica's case as an emergent situation, obviously. Yeah. So we're fast forwarding things that we might normally take our time with. And that's why we're here on a Sunday afternoon. Sure. So again, I appreciate it.
They ask him a few generic questions and they ask him about the names of the victims. He denies knowing Jessica, but admits to knowing Corporal Como. At this point, I don't believe that he's fully aware of why he's there. I think that he was under the assumption that he was going to be asked about his neighbor, Larry Jones, or just the corporal because of his knowledge of her. When he was asked to provide DNA and boot print samples, he doesn't object at all. After he's told that his tire treads match the treads found at the house of the missing girl, he still seems unaffected. Probably because he knows that the tires he has are a popular brand for the make and model of the vehicle. At one point, the detective steps out of the interrogation room and comes back with the results of his boot print.
I told you when I came in here that I'm going to treat you with respect, and I've asked you to do the same for me. We talked about the whole idea of how we've approached you here, okay? The trying to be as discreet as possible, okay? But the problem is, Russell, is every time I walk out of this room, there's another issue that comes up, okay? And it's not issues that point away from you, it's issues that point at you, okay? And I want you to see what I mean, all right? This is the footwear impression of the person who approached the rear of Jessica Lloyd's house on the evening of the 28th and 29th of January, okay? All right? Now, I want you to keep in mind that this is slightly smaller, okay, in scale, okay?
Okay.
All right, that's not to scale. The footwear is actually bigger.
Okay.
If you look here on the ruler, you'll see that 1 inch is just slightly smaller than an actual inch, okay? But this is the way it prints off on the computer.
Okay.
I'm going to move this over so you can see what I mean, all right? Because essentially, when you're dealing with footwear impressions, we have a gentleman on the OPP who's basically world-renowned. His name is John Norman. And essentially, with footwear impressions, you're in a situation where you're pretty much in the area of fingerprints, okay? And essentially, what we're talking about here is, especially when you start adding in other pieces of information that support an investigative position.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a photocopy of the boot that you took off your foot
Yeah.
just a little while ago. Okay. Now, I'm not an expert in footwear impressions, so I rely on the experts. Footwear impressions are very much like fingerprint comparisons. Okay. You take a look at this print, and again, this is one print. This person walked through. There's several different prints to compare. So we're going to get features off of one print to compare, features off of another print to compare.
Yeah.
These are identical. Okay. Your vehicle drove up the side of Jessica Lloyd's house. Your boots walked to the back of Jessica Lloyd's house on the evening of the 28th and 29th of January. Okay. You want discretion. We need to have some honesty. Okay? Because this is getting out of control really fast, Russell. Okay, really, really fast.
If you didn't catch that, this is the point where he's seeing that the evidence is stacking up against him. The tire treads were a match, and now his boot print is a match, which means two things. One, it's not looking very good for him, his credibility is slipping fast, and two, this absolute lunatic wore the same boots to the interrogations that he wore while committing a crime. This speaks volumes in the psychology of people like this. There's always a point where the criminal becomes too confident and ends up hanging themselves on something so simple. Of all the calculated decisions he had to make up to this point, with the stealthy break-ins and making sure that he was never seen, he is so sure that they're not going to think of him as a suspect that he slips on the same boots to go to the police station. He also refused a lawyer. He could have just walked out. At the point where he walked in, they even told him, you can leave if you want, or you can seek counsel if you want, and he did neither of those things. After he realizes that he's made a mistake, his immediate reaction is to make sure that his wife isn't affected by this as much as possible. Which is something that I don't get, because if you don't want your wife to be affected by something like this, don't commit the crimes in the first place. If you murder someone, your family is going to be stuck with the burden of association with a killer for the rest of their life. This also happened in the Israel Keys case, where he wanted to make sure that his daughter wasn't known as the daughter of a serial killer for her whole life. Well, you shouldn't have been a serial killer then. Another strange thing that happens at this point in the interview is that he tells the interviewer to call him Russ instead of Russell. Like, why is his nickname, or what you'd rather be called, even on your radar of things that matter right now, as he doesn't seem to be the type of criminal that did all of this for notoriety?
Russell, what are we going to do?
Call me Russ, please.
Okay. What are we going to do, Russ?
They begin discussing the crimes, and he never really straight out says, quote, yes, I killed those people. But about an hour and a half in, he begins talking about his camera and telling the investigator where his memory cards and camera and hard drives and all that are, and that they would include the pictures of the first two sexual assault victims as well as Corporal Como and Jessica. And he actually gives that information up because he knows that they're tearing his wife's brand new house apart, and he wants to keep them from doing that by telling them where everything's at.
But there's no, your time in Ottawa is wasted, really. I'll tell you where the membership cards are.
Where are they?
They're in the house there, but
In Ottawa?
yeah.
Whereabouts?
Some in the camera bag, which they would have found in my office.
Mm-hmm.
And in the, when you walk into the office on the left side, there's a desk of drawers, set of
Okay.
drawers, like a filing cabinet, wooden, IKEA. In one of the top two drawers, and there's a plastic divider,
Yeah.
and there's inside there are two memory cards,
Okay.
which are blank, but I'm sure they can be
And whose images are on those cards?
well, I've erased them, but I expect you'll be able to draw images of Jessica and I.
What about Marie?
may be images on there as well.
And the 2 women from September?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have those images stored anywhere else?
Yep. There are 2 hard drives in the house in Ottawa. I can draw you a little picture if you like.
After this, he then finally tells police where to find Jessica's body.
This is the biggest of the area. This might have better parameters for you. Here's tweet.
.7 kilometer from this intersection on the side of the road.
And what road is that? Kerry? No. South of, can't read that word. East Hungerford? Does that make sense? Oh, there it is there. Okay. How far off the road is she?
40 feet.
Is she covered with anything?
She's wrapped up.
In
She's
what?
on the surface. Just a gray something or other cover.
Okay. Barry, the obvious question I'm going to have for you is, when they go there, and they'll be there shortly, they're going to find her?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I'll be right back.
The investigator then asks Russell about Jessica and what happened. He explains in detail everything that went down, and after he tells what happens, he immediately goes into the detail of Corporal Como. Notice how calm he is, even though his entire life is essentially over.
Why don't we start with Jessica? How does that start for you?
I saw her in her house on her treadmill. Wednesday night, I guess. And I noticed she wasn't there Thursday. So I got into the house to look around. Then and then left. Noticed she'd come home. So I went back in. Through the back patio door while she was sleeping. So I woke her up. Didn't hit her. She only hit her once. Friday night.
Okay.
Well, so I raped her in her house, and then I took her to the car and took her to Tweed. And spent the day in Tweed. And then I hit her as we were walking. She thought we were leaving. Hit her on the back of the head.
Okay.
And
What did the hit on the back of the head do?
Well, I was surprised her skull gave way. She was there and immediately unconscious. And I strangled her.
Okay. What did you hit her with?
Flashlight
Okay. In the house or outside the house?
in the house. Yeah, they'll find signs of that.
Where in the house did this happen?
In the main portion, just in front of the fireplace.
What do you mean they'll find signs of it?
Oh, there's quite a bit of blood. I hadn't expected. I'd expected to knock her out. But obviously generated a lot of blood.
What did she bleed onto?
The floor. It's just tile floor.
Okay. Did you clean it up or did you?
I wiped it up. I know it'll be easily spotted.
What makes you think that? Like, if I walked in that house right
Well,
now,
you
would I see
You
it?
wouldn't see it, not at all, but, you know, the right science will show it, I'm sure.
Okay. So when that happened, did she have clothes on or was she naked? Or?
She was dressed.
Okay. So when we find her, is she going to have those clothes on too?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Marie France Como.
There was an open window in the basement of her house when she was away. I went in there a couple of nights before she came home. Looked around. I went back in there late at night when she was at home. She was on the phone in her bedroom. She actually discovered me in the basement. She was trying to get her cat to come upstairs, and the cat was in the basement, had seen me and was fixated on me in the corner. She couldn't get the cat up, so she came downstairs to try and get the cat, and weren't sure why she came over to me. I guess the cat was staring at me, and she was wondering what the cat was staring at. The lights were on. So when she spotted me, I had the same flashlight. I subdued her. Tied her up, brought her upstairs. And strangled her later in the morning. Well, more suffocated her. Right. Some tape. Left her there.
How did you subdue her? And when you say subdued her in the basement, what did you do?
Well, I had the same flashlight, and you know, she saw me right away. So it was just I hit her a couple of times and around her head, try and knock her out. Didn't, but she was bleeding a little bit. Eventually, after a struggle, subdued her.
Okay. Any blood from that struggle?
Oh yeah. No, not a whole bunch, but a flashlight did break her skin a couple of times.
Okay. What area of the basement did that take place in?
I was hiding behind the furnace, so she spotted me right there.
Okay. Did she recognize you?
No, I had stuff on my face.
Okay. So you go upstairs, and you said she suffocated?
Well, I suffocated her. I put tape on her. I put tape on her mouth, and then I put tape on her nose and held it there so she couldn't breathe.
Him waiting on her in the basement with the cat is some horror movie shit that I'm definitely losing sleep over tonight. He also went on to explain the first 2 sexual assaults, and those people have chosen to remain anonymous, so I will not include the audio of that. It's pretty much the exact same thing as the murders, except he lets them go. On February 8, 2010, Russell was relieved of command. He was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of forcible confinement, 2 counts of breaking and entering, and 2 counts of sexual assault. Later, another 82 charges were added. The news of his arrest and confession was broadcasted across the entire country, and his neighbor and former suspect in this case, Larry Jones, was shocked to hear the location of Jessica's body. Apparently, Russell had actually approached Larry and asked him where he went hunting at. Larry told him that he had a very specific favorite hunting spot that he liked to frequent and told Larry that he should go with him sometime. The area that he told him is exactly where the body was found. Larry has no doubt in his mind that Russell was trying to frame him for the murder, knowing that he was already a suspect. On October 21st, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders, 2 10-year sentences for the forcible confinements, and 82 separate 1-year sentences for breaking and entering. In the court, they would go over what happened to the victims as well as what happened during the break-ins. They said he would break in, take a picture of the room, take a picture of the underwear drawers, and then pictures of himself in the underwear, and usually he would take pictures or video of himself masturbating in or on the underwear. On October 22nd, he was stripped of his rank and all awards by the Governor General. His pay since his arrest was seized, his uniform was burned, and his medals and vehicle were crushed and scrapped. I think that's exactly what should happen in situations like this. He is and always will be in prison without the possibility of parole. So since he confessed and there is outstanding evidence to prove that it was him, there aren't really any alternative theories. There is always the question as to why, that we really never got the answer to. He didn't answer that question in the interrogation. In the search of his home, police found thousands of articles of female clothing and also found pictures that he had taken of himself in female clothing. Even though it wasn't documented or stated anywhere, it makes you wonder what went on at his home at a young age. He stayed with his mother after his parents' divorce, so maybe his female clothing fetish developed then. Maybe his mother had some hand in this, or maybe it's something he developed completely on his own when she wasn't around. Maybe he'll talk more before he wastes away in prison so we can get a little closure and understanding. Understanding the motive behind these crimes is our only chance at keeping them from happening. If we can begin to understand the psychology of people like this and maybe develop a way to detect or even treat the mental disorder that causes it, maybe we can prevent another crime from happening. Maybe understanding and limiting the contributing factors that we already know to cause long-term emotional damage would help. An opinion that I've always held is that more times than not, parents create murderers. How many serial killer documentaries have you watched where the early life of a killer is an absolute shit show? Pretty much every one of the household murderer names that you know was either molested or beaten or abandoned by their parents. I also believe that in this specific case, for someone just to admit to 82 break-ins and then randomly escalate to what he did, I feel like there's a lot that we're missing that he's not telling us. I think that there are other crimes that he committed that he's never going to admit to. There was another rapist in the area at the same exact time in the same area. I believe that there are several of the victims of that rapist that I'll cover in a later episode that are probably him. As a side note, people always wonder what they could have done to prevent this from happening from a victim standpoint. There are 1,000 different answers to that question, but I'm going to touch on a few. first, you need a security or an alarm system. Sometimes criminals sneak around houses days or even weeks before they actually do anything. You may never know unless you notice something suspicious on your cameras. The alarm system sticker itself can be a deterrent sometimes, as criminals often go for the easy targets. If you can't afford the security system, dogs are nature's alarm systems, but aren't nearly as effective if you remember my last episode. Some interesting advice that I read on a forum online about this subject is that if you're a single female living alone, maybe invest in some used large male boots or hats and place them outside or inside your doorway randomly to potentially deter opportune criminals. Obviously, self-defense courses or firearms with proper training is good, but it's not always effective. What I mean by that is, like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. People that are trying to hurt you aren't going to wake you up and let you get ready before they start attacking. Like in this specific case, the people were asleep when they were attacked. There's no point in having a gun or knife for home defense if you're going to keep it unloaded or out of reach. This gets really complicated when you have children or maybe live in a situation that doesn't allow for that. And lastly, if you find yourself in a situation like this, in this case where someone has already broken in and you can't get out, you can't get to a weapon, and you can't run away, you can't always just comply. I wouldn't consider the first two females to be lucky by any means, but to comply with a crazy person that broke into your house may seal your fate. Complying also may mean that they are now in control of all of the evidence. Don't just believe that they aren't going to kill you just because they say so and just because you do what they say. The person is obviously crazy. There is a point where you aren't necessarily fighting for just your life, you're fighting for the life of the next person that this person may leave and go attack. If you kick and scream and fight with everything that you have, gouging at the eyes and scratching and biting, that's just more evidence that the criminal will not be able to cover up or hide. Can you imagine if Russell had shown up to post or formation with scratches everywhere and a black eye? For example, on the same day of the first sexual assault, he appeared on TV for hosting an attempt to break a Guinness World Record for pulling an aircraft down the tarmac. So what do you think creates a murderer? What do you think are good tips for home security or self-defense? Let me know by sending me a message or comment on any social platform. If there's any streaming service or website that you want to listen or interact with me on that I'm not on already, please let me know. I'm learning that people are listening to the podcast from all over the world, and I'm very grateful for the listeners overseas, and I want to make it as easy as possible to receive this information. So let me know if there's something that I'm not on or not aware of. I'm going to start doing Patreon shoutouts on every other episode so that there's more than just a few names at a time. If you would like to help build the quality of the show or help me put out more content, please head on over to patreon.com/thetmpodcast and either become a member or just donate to the cause. The TM Podcast is researched, written, and recorded by myself, and the intro and outro were written by the artist Stress.